we are here to talk about routing on intent signals, specifically best practices and do's and don'ts. And who better to talk about routing on intent signals than people who are literally building a product that helps you route on intent signals. So we have the growth team from Default, who is going to walk us through a lot of best practices, do's and don'ts on routing with intent signals based on all the things that they do themselves at Default, but also what they've seen from a whole slew of pretty incredible companies who are also customers of theirs. And so I have the growth team here, Stan and Caitlyn from Default. And Stan, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us kicked off and do some more formal introductions, if you will, and then let us dive in on the content, the reason why we're all here today.
Great. I'm super excited to present you some of the routing intent signals, do's and don'ts, especially because we have seen probably over 1,000 different intent signals workflows built on Default across hundreds of customers. And also, we are huge Default, routing intent signals users ourselves. And oh boy, we have some thoughts. So kicking things off, I'm Stan, leading growth here at Default. We built initially routing for our sales teams that's sitting right behind me. And Caitlyn is sort of our go-to-market engineer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Caitlyn. I am on the Default growth team. Stan is our fearless leader, and he does a lot of the strategy, and I do a little bit of the engineering execution part. The two of us just hack through go-to-market problems and figure out how to feed our AEs the most leads possible, essentially.
And now, since Stan, you're on here as Stanimal the Animal, I do expect Caitlyn to refer to you by that name every single time for the next 54 minutes. So I'm just going to put that out there.
I don't think that's going to be a problem because Caitlyn already refers to me that way. So that's going to be no problem whatsoever. Great. So what we'll be talking about today. So I wanted to take us sort of through what are the intent signals general, sort of to get the sense of the understanding that we all have about that, to make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about categorization of intent signals. Then I'm going to show you the 27 intent signals examples that I'm sure you probably are aware of, especially some of them. But best ways to capture the intent signals, like what to not automate. We're going to dive deep into the human versus machine intent framework. And I'm going to show you two of my intent strategies that we have seen battle tested across our sort of go-to-market org and hundreds of others. And then we'll dive into examples that we exactly used based on what we have seen from our customers and also what we have actually tested and what Caitlyn have built for us on the intent signal side. So what are the intent signals, Caitlyn?
Yeah, so just to kick off here, I realized recently not everyone is even familiar with the concept of intent signals. So as we're thinking about building out a strategy for growth, Stan and I have marketing budget, we have resources, and the real question that we're trying to solve is always who are we reaching out to? Who are we pouring our resources in? So one of the best ways that we're able to figure out who to be reaching out to and how is via intent signals. So intent signals are basically like an indicator that somebody would maybe be interested in buying our product, or they're a good fit for our product, and now is a good time for that. From a macro perspective, that really falls into three categories: the explicit intent signals, which are the intent signals that everybody wishes that all of their prospects would do, requesting a book demo call, clicking buy now, maybe filling out a contact form, right? So very explicit, hey, I'm interested in your product. Versus the implicit, which is the second tier. We also like these, browsing product or pricing pages, spending a lot of time on those pages, maybe reading product reviews on G2 or Vendor Sage. And then lastly, the inferred signal. So this is actually where Stan and I spend a lot of our time in the intent signal space. So figuring out what companies are growing, right? So inside of our total addressable market, what companies are we looking at that are maybe hiring a new AE? Maybe they're closing a new round of funding. Those are all signals to us that it would be a good win for us to reach out to this company because we already know that our product is a good fit for them.
Exactly. And I mean, there are basically two ways we all should think about intent signals, right? First one is the first party, right? Those are your intent signals. Those are the signals that only you own, and only you can properly execute on those signals. I'm going to tell a little bit more on how others can also sort of take action on your first-party signals and how you should avoid that and how you should actually be first to act on intent signals. And then, of course, the second category of intent signals are third-party intent signals. Those are the intent signals that everyone owns, everyone with a big budget can buy those intent signals, such as review website, data providers, Bambora, 6sense, and all of those aggregators. You can sort of purchase the signal and use to sort of guide your go-to-market decisions. Obviously, like they're not created equal, but on that a little bit later. Here are the intent signals examples. Here, just a fresh reminder of what I have seen work best. Obviously, starting with a demo request, like that's the holy grail. This is what I dream of, getting more of demo requests for our AEs to make them happy, make sure they are good to go on that front, and routing that is the simplest out of all of these, because if a person enters your website and requests a demo, you should route them to the best rep possible, no questions asked. The others, so Matt, I was wondering if we can ask the audience how many intent signals out of those, or maybe the ones that I'm not showing here, how many of those actually do you track? I was super interested to hear your answers here, because we only recently started to track those effectively. Not all intent signals are created equal. This picture shows whenever there's a new hire, like for example, a new person joins another org. Well, that's of course is an intent signal, but it's not as valuable as a demo request. I should have shown a demo request bar to be flying through my sort of screen, because it's that more important than just a new hire or someone liking my post, or maybe someone even visiting my pricing page or homepage and whatnot.
How many intent signals do you all track at default?
So I'm not sure exactly how many of them we track right now. In aggregate, I know we track 3 for sure.
Honestly, I think in the last 6 months, this has kind of come on our radar of like, okay, now we have customers coming in the door. So how do we take this data and figure out what is working and not working? So yeah, I would say probably 3 to 5 we're tracking now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it seems like most folks are in that middle bucket of 6 to 15. The flip side of this, and I know you're going to talk about this, is it's actually with all data, right? Whether it's intent signals or anything else, is like, okay, so you're tracking intent signals, but how many intent signals are you actually acting on? And my guess is that's probably a different answer. And actually, maybe that's one of the things you all can talk about too, is is there value to tracking intent signals that you're not actually acting on today?
Yeah, absolutely. The only way that you know that is once you get all of the data in, right? So it's kind of the first step to this whole thing. We'll circle back on that later.
Cool. So obviously you can track as many signals as you want and take action on a select few, but you kind of need to know, right, Caitlyn, to like, what does it take to convert a prospect into a customer?
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of where we're leading. For a little bit of context on intent signals and my background, I had initially built out a sales org at Copy AI, and then I ended up launching a RevOps AI agency where I was building out the architecture for a ton of different startups. So it's interesting coming from Copy AI and now working at Default. I would say the type of product you have and the business model you have are 2 of the biggest factors that are going to go into like intent signals and figuring out the process for that. So if you look at a process and a product like Grammarly or even Copy AI, let's say the price of Grammarly, and I haven't checked recently, is $20 a month. The steps that you're going to take to convert a prospect into a customer for a lower tiered, high volume consumer brand is going to be much different than if you were trying to convert a prospect for, say, Default or like a Mad Kudu. Right, where the entrance price for a product for like Mad Kudu would be, let's say, $40K. The way that you're thinking about how to interact with prospects and like the timing for how to reach out, it's all kind of starting with the data of your existing customer base, right? So as we were trying to figure out, Stan and I, like the growth strategy for Default, we spent a bunch of time looking through our current customer base, asking them, how did you hear about us? What made you realize that Default was a good fit for you? Was it us reaching out to you? Was it, we run Google ads, we run LinkedIn ads because we have this existing list of total addressable market. And looking at that list, we're trying to figure out like, when is the best time to reach out? And when, maybe they're using a competitor, when their contract is coming up, we want to make sure that they're thinking about default. So keeping top of mind for anyone who would be a good fit for us. And then once we had figured out like what are the levers that we can pull that make somebody convert or potentially make somebody, even book a call with one of our account executives, we basically took those signals and put them into a workflow sequence. And now we're in the phase of like testing. Do we need one really good intent signal? Do we need 50 intent signals? And what is the sequence that is the most effective between this? So this is really like the top of mind question for every head of growth or growth organization, especially at an earlier stage company. What we're doing is spending our time and resources figuring out the answer to this question, as probably most people are in their own organization, starting out with what is already working and then taking those signals, breaking them down and figuring out the best, most compelling order, and then also timing, right? So in the beginning, we had spoken about the different levels of intent signals, the explicit versus inferred. So being able to like reach out to people who are directly booking a call versus, okay, now we've seen somebody look at our product page 3 times and we know that's like a very strong signal for us based on the data of our customers. So yeah, just kind of, I would say it depends on the organization, but start with the customer data.
Yeah, and also to like one point here, I think we are in a unique position where we actually figuring a lot of stuff out. However, even larger organizations that we work with, they also have seen a lot of intent signals routing to be challenging, especially because you have different accounts, different contacts, different regions, different routing queues, different logic across many different segments that you work with. And I think even acting on some of the routing signals while you have a large brand behind you, a strong RevOps function that actually can support a bunch of the different workflows within your organization can even be way more powerful. I think it's even probably I want to say easier. The challenges are slightly different, but the benefit of actually being able to capture those intent signals, route them properly, and then act on them is far greater for a larger organization with a ton of resources than a smaller company. Great. So let's talk specifics, let's talk strategy on like how we can actually capture those intent signals. Like, of course, there are a few intent signals that you can track on the first party side of things, especially like website visits. This is what kind of we do now, a unified call the other companies in the space, social engagement, tracking social interactions on LinkedIn, Twitter, or any sort of social platform that you use. Reddit is basically scraping that data, categorizing it, and pushing it into your Salesforce or CRM. Then also an ad engagement. So here we have experience working with factors, LinkedIn ads, API, Google ads, also a little bit, but that's you can sort of need to layer on the website intent to make sure what's working, what's not. Third party is more about job signals, user gem, common room, all of the other tools. Community engagement, those are more scraping sort of, again, community, like Slack communities, all possible the things that we have done. Harder to do, harder to execute, especially at the larger organization, I would say. And also like there's not a ton of those community engagements. So you have to be very careful on how you actually treat them and like make sure you also do not burn a relationship with sales and marketing, sending, hey, those are intent signals, go reach out to them. And there's a ton of leads just a few leads that never convert, right? And then also like there are review sites and aggregators that we talked about, 6sense, Bamboo, and many others that I'm sure I'm not mentioning here. Great. So now let's talk about human versus machine automation framework or lead routing framework. We have seen a ton of mistakes people make with terms of automations on what to automate, probably burning the relationships with other teams, especially at a larger organization that teams may need you need to make sure like you're making, especially RevOps function is making marketing happy with like telling them what to do. Oh, like I'm telling them, capturing that intent data properly. And then also sales, like they're actually getting that intent data that they need and they are routed and everything is sort of, we improve the lives of sales essentially. So what to automate? Like automate routing and assignment. Like you need to support the teams that you work with. No one wants to waste time on like manual data uploads. Notification to reps is also extremely huge part. Like reps won't take action if they do not know about this, right? So timely delivery of the notification is extremely crucial here. And also context gathering. If you can gather as much context about the intent signal as possible, we have seen simply higher engagement rates from our reps when we tell them like, hey, this is the intent signals. This is what it means. This is some other information that you can use to act on that intent signal. The main thing that we have seen is not trying to automate actions for reps. If you, for example, build out a flow where it will enroll contacts and prospects into sequences for reps, no one really owns that function, right? No one owns the ownership and the performance of that campaign. Meaning you get the intent signals, you route them properly, but then reps like, oh, it's something that RevOps does for me or marketing does for me. They do not really take action on it. They do not own the performance. No one is thinking about how you can actually improve that flow. And so therefore, no one is driving the results. So what gets measured gets improved. Someone needs to own something in order to get measured and to get it improved.
Yeah, I have a question for you all, and this is maybe more on the revenue enablement side. You hit on it a little bit with the, not automating the actions for your team because there's no ownership. So this question is more on the actions that you're taking. And I know, you think about intent signals, we're talking about like website visitors, right? Like a lot of these other actions that people are taking that aren't necessarily like, oh yeah, I told them that I was interested and we had a conversation sort of deal. And so what's the best way to actually like leverage those signals, and what should your messaging and call it like sales approach look like? What are some things that you've learned there that work or don't work? Like, for example, if someone goes to, like you said, goes to say the pricing page on your website like 3 times, your message to them should probably not start with, hey, I saw you visited the pricing page of our website 3 times. Are you interested in our product? So like those sort of things, like how do you best leverage those? Because that's the other aspect of this. And I think people in RevOps and enablement are faced with this as well, is like, it's one thing to route these and queue these up, right? It's another thing to actually like effectively leverage them. And time is of the essence, like you said, too. So what are some do's and don'ts there, if you have anything?
Yeah, I agree. Like we have tested, we learned on our mistakes that it's really not effective to mention the intent signal. Hey, I noticed that you visited my pricing page. Do you have any questions about pricing? Probably not the best way to lead. Again, hey, I noticed that you like this LinkedIn post. It can work, but it's a little bit too creepy, I would say. It doesn't really work well, especially now. I think it used to work like a few years ago when this was extremely new way of approaching prospects, but it doesn't now. So I think now is only using the intent signals to sort of understand where that customer is in the journey. If someone is browsing product pages, they probably may be also interested in like viewing an interactive demo. They probably want more resources. They probably have some questions about pricing. So what is the one layer above sort of information that you can provide to them that will turn them into a more qualified buyer? So probably maybe they have questions about integrations. We can sort of lead with that. And maybe they also ask questions. Hey, like we are running a promotion about pricing, or like, do you have any questions about pricing? Or we have seen companies of your size often need this specific product that you were mentioning from the pricing page specifically. So trying to understand where that customer is in the journey by measuring the intent signal is probably the best way. How you do it is extremely hard. You probably cannot do it across all intent signals. So it's much easier to start with just a select few and try to automate. One thing that we have seen work very well, if someone is reading one piece of content, sending another content to them on the same topic or similar topic works extremely well. We have seen that work extremely well. It takes some time to get the tech setup done to make sure like, if this post is about lead routing, then like tell them more about, tell them the lead routing checklist.
Yeah. I like that feedback though, and that guidance, because it's clear. And again, this might sound obvious, but it's clear you're looking at that from a buyer centric point of view. So you're like, hey, if a buyer basically takes these actions, then these are other things that they're probably interested in that could help them along their journey. And that's the ultimate goal, right? You're just trying to guide people and deliver as much value as you can through the buying process and the buying journey. If you went with a seller or a sales centric mentality, then you would do the opposite, which is like what we just talked about, which is, hey, I saw you did this. Do you want to like, you ready to book time for a demo or what? Like, come on, let's do this thing. So I think that's a great way to frame up these intent signals is they are telling you about where folks are at within the buying process, the buying journey. And then a really great way to think about this is how can you serve up more things that are valuable to them to help them navigate that journey? And that's a great way to use these intent signals that you have.
Correct.
I feel like on top of this as well, like if somebody is giving you some kind of signal that they're interested in your product, it's because they're experiencing some kind of pain point, right? Like there's something that's driving them to go check out the default website and like scroll through the product page. And when you're able to like flip over more of those intent signals and like figure out more of the picture, it's easier to like deduce what the actual problem that they're experiencing is, and then like lead with the approach of like, hey, here's how our product is gonna, help your pain point versus exactly the messages that we get on like LinkedIn every once in a while, like, hey, I see that you saw our page, and you're just like, oh, that's so weird.
Yeah. But if it was framed in terms of like, hey, like, do you have this problem? Are you experiencing this problem? Here's the way to solve for this. Hey, I saw you did this. So here's another thing that I think would be helpful for you, right? Like those are helpful or valuable. You're not just telling me that you saw that I did a thing, right? It's like, well, yeah, like anyone can see that, right? Like tell me what you're going to do that's helpful with that.
Correct. And like real life example that's worked the best for us, especially when it comes to like website visits. That we'll talk in a second about how we actually do it. But like just in general, the most effective way is if someone is visiting our website that is a clear intent signal that they're interested in default somehow. What we do then is we research what they use as a tech stack, and then we highlight what are the differences. Like, hey, I noticed that you use this competitor of ours. Like, here is what you might be experiencing with that specific vendor. Does that resonate? That usually it's the best strategy, especially when it comes to the intent signals. We do not mention like, hey, I noticed you visit our website, because that, again, that's used to work when it was new. Now it's not new. Everyone has it. Everyone is doing capturing that intent. So we have to be more strategic and smart about how you actually utilize the intent signals you're capturing.
Yeah, and Chris asked a question, just some feedback on the don't automate actions for reps of like, and I know you mentioned time is of the essence with some of these things as well. So he said he assumed by don't automate actions for reps, you mean like don't auto send a templated message for the rep. But are there certain automations that for reps that you would want to do? For example, like assigning or requiring a follow-up on the signal, or do you always kind of leave some of that stuff up to the judgment of the rep? Just like some questions on the gray area.
Yeah, great question. Perfectly transition into strategies, right? So intent signal strategies, there is basically two, right? One is account owner strategy. You first map your TAM, assign accounts, and then route intent signals to reps that own accounts, right? Second intent signal strategy is like you basically gather intent signals and then route them properly based on scoring models or routing logic that you use. And maybe if there's an existing comment, you alert one, right? So depending on what strategy that you use, you can do it differently. You can also ensure there is some SLAs or ROE that you can enforce on reps, task in Salesforce, tasks in Outreach, or any sales engagement tool. It's a definitely great way to automate as much as possible, yet leave the execution or acting upon that. I don't think we have seen automating tasks for reps, meaning creation task for reps. But if there is a high intent signal, maybe you want to then score the account. And if there's a high intent signal from a high intent account, you probably maybe want to create a task to make sure that intent happens. Or if your organization is actually operating on task, that probably is a perfect sort of way to ensure the reps actually take action on that intent signal, and you can sort of create a report and like see actually how many of those tasks have been completed versus not. So definitely possible. Automate as much as possible, routing assignment, task creation as possible, but do not automate actions, the actual outreach or acting upon the intent signal, right? So do not send templated message, but if your team operates on task and utilizes task for daily activities, that's a perfect way to automate, because then reps do not need to create a task. They do not need to enroll prospects into sequences. They do not need to research the prospect because you have already done that for them. They only need to use their knowledge about the product industry, the prospect, and all the other intent signals to send a personalized message at the right time with the right tone of voice.
Yeah, so I feel like, especially from the perspective of not automating outreach for reps, we have gone into the space where almost everything is, you're able to almost automate everything or use AI to automate it. And I think an exceptional head of growth or a growth team, your job is to not only find who is ready to convert, but also enrich as much of that information as possible and package it in a way that when you give it to a rep, it's like this perfect lead for them, right? Like that's the goal.
That is the goal.
Here is all the intent signals that we have found. Like we've done the work to figure out that here are their pain points. Like this is the stones that we've turned over. They're ready. This is like the time their contract renewal is up. Like now go and reach out to them. That's like the perfect, in my mind, setup between automation and then also like that personalized outreach, because I feel like no matter how advanced we get with automation and AI, like the human like trust aspect of sales will never be like automated.
That's right.
That's your hot
right.
take, everybody. Right there.
Cool. So we decided to go with account ownership route in terms of routing intent signal strategies. For us, we decided to map our TAM into CRM and eat the cost of TAM maintenance, making sure the actual CRM is full with rich accounts that are sort of always updated. And then we simply reassign or assign those reps all the accounts that they need to work on, create a book of business. Right now, it's quite simple because we only have a handful of reps, but we are preparing to add more and more reps. So that strategy will need to change. The next thing that we decided for account ownership is just CRM hygiene. It's much clearer on who owns specific accounts. The distribution is extremely clear. Everyone is getting the same amount of accounts for like tier A, tier B, tier C account. So there's the most fair. We decided not to go with intent signals, individual intent signal routing, because like if we gather the intent signal and then we have to score and route an account, there could be simply a case of unequal distribution. Like one rep will get a lot of intent signals that are only social interactions, and the other rep will get intent signals that are website visits. As you can see, like those are two separate intent signals, yet the routing for those should be separate. The scoring should be separate. So that complexity of like, how do we actually scale beyond that, and how do we make sure the distribution is equal, simply decided against that option. It's relatively simpler to start, because if you don't know how many intent signals you're tracking, well, it's simpler to start because, I'll just, treat them as I go and route them as I go. It's definitely possible, especially if you do not know how many intent signals you want to track, what are valuable. So I would start with this, but probably I'm very happy we decided to do the hard part at the beginning and focus on mapping our TAM CRM. Probably more expensive, but in the beginning, but definitely easier for routing strategies and like for assignment and reassignment, and for the skills, preparing ourselves for scaling our sales team.
Yeah, the unequal distribution is like a big one in that con bucket too. I mean, like people leave companies and find new jobs just for that reason, right? And so again, I think that's one of those things that might, and I'm a big bias for action kind of person too. So I'm like, just start, right? You don't need to like plan and have this whole like, don't do more work than you should up front. But I think that's definitely one of those big cons that, like you said, if you go that route, I would simultaneously just start on the account ownership route too, just because you're going to get there, right? Eventually. And that's going to be the thing that you should do. So it's like start now, but you don't want to waste time and like hold up anyone from getting stuff done today either.
Correct. And I think also there is a solution for that problem. Like you can create, if you only capture a set amount of intent signals, you probably can create separate routing logics for different intent signals. But like, as you probably can imagine, if you have 3 intent signals, it's pretty easy. But if you have 30, that's a mess, right? Because adding even one rep to 30 queues is probably half a day, right? So that's not possible. But I also understand TAM maintenance is not possible for some orgs, or like it's very hard to make sure you capture all of your TAM, right? I have a friend that works at Rippling. They have a huge TAM. They basically work with everyone. And like making sure everyone is in the TAM, it's never really possible, right? It's never really possible. They always get more and more a new account, but they actually route intent signals this way. So they first got the account routing, the account is created, routed, enriched, and then they capture signals, and then they alert the account rep, and then they also reassign and whatnot. So that's great. Before we sort of talk about how we actually route intent signals, I would love to, Matt, if you can, we can show a poll on like what are some of the best intent signals. That would be amazing. On like, okay, like this is what we use. What do you guys use to make sure maybe we're missing out on something here? I'd love to understand what others are, intent signals are the best and most effective.
What's your favorite?
I mean, website visitor is probably my favorite. We are very inbound heavy business. We get a lot of inbound leads in my pipeline and also website visitors. So for us is that. However, we have a very unique problem where we have a default.com domain. So as you can imagine, we get a lot of unqualified traffic from many different countries, com domain in like when developers are building apps. So we get a ton of like random traffic. So we have to be smart on what actually we use to qualify, to sort of capture that intent. And for us, it's not the homepage. If someone is on the homepage, that probably is not high enough intent. But if someone is researching about our products, our solution, pricing pages, blog, we sort of then, okay, yes, this could be a high quality account that we can route to the appropriate account owner.
Yeah.
And it's interesting from like a personal, how we ended up building this. Our engineers basically put UTMs that follow people's cookies. So as people go into our site, even if they move around in the site, like traditionally we would lose that data. But since the UTM tracks the cookies, we can see like an actual story of how people follow the site. And then it gives us some more data around like how people are actually viewing the site and like how interested they actually are in a product.
Yeah. I see. So yeah, I don't know if you all saw the results, but some of the answers we got: LinkedIn profile views, website visitors mentioned specifically like searching for a specific product category, and then landing on the product page or the demo page. And I like the product page specific stuff as well. I think those are really relevant. And then like you said, if there's content specific pieces, for example, that line up with maybe a certain feature or problem set that your product or solution solves for, those are also really great. And there's also interesting things you can do there, even with like ads and stuff, right? To like drive like do ads that are centered around a piece of content for a particular topic, drive those people to a page. You got intent signals, website visitor tracking there, right? Now you can leverage that information to serve them up more content like that. Like Stan mentioned, you work them through the buying process cycle, right? And so there's a lot of stuff you can do there. That's the reason why those are some of my favorites too.
That's great.
Taking notes, exactly. Cool. Caitlyn, since you build some of the workflows here for us, would you wanna maybe explain how we think about website visitor routing?
Yeah, actually, I did want to talk about something that I found to be super important because I've spent a lot of time building out these signal-based workflows for different companies. And I've used so many different products, and this is not a demo of default by any means. This is just why I actually like using defaults for our own products or our own processes. And it's basically like there are all of these products that do intent signals, right? Where you can get the data and figure out who is doing what when. But the problem that I always had with all of these products was it's really hard to actually aggregate all of that information into a singular place. So it was like you're building out custom webhooks, you're using Zapier that's breaking every other day and having to fix it. And then every product seems to want to own the tab. Like they have their own dashboard built into the product, and they want every single person from a company to like learn the whole product and figure out how to use it and like live in that product. When I realized an important part of a company like acquiring a new process and it actually sticking is building the products in a place where people are already using, their tech stack. So for us, like for me joining Default, Stan has been around for a little bit longer, and he actually built all of these signaling into our Salesforce account. So we have Unify, we have KeyPlay, we have a bunch of really awesome products that help us figure out like intent signals. But for me, it's really nice because he has it all hooked into our Salesforce account. So I think like the orchestration piece is super important for us. And like for me personally, I really wish that I had had a product like Default before when I was using all of these different products, trying to piece them together.
And I think that's another piece for everyone here to think about. And again, we already know all of this, but sometimes it's good to be reminded of that. Is people already have reps, everyone, right? They have tools, systems, ways that they work. Your goal, they're like a prospect, right? Like the less friction, the less things you need to have them do, the more chances are that they'll complete the thing that you want them to do. So instead of giving them one more thing that they should look at, figure out how you can push stuff to maybe the account object in Salesforce so that everything is in one particular spot for them. And I'll let you kind of take that away.
Yeah, exactly. You absolutely nailed it. And even internally, like we work at Default, and this is our actual platform that we use every single day. And we have sales reps, and even our own internal sales reps they're living in Salesforce, they're living in Slack. Right. So as we've architected all of these different workflows to try to make their lives easier, because they're great at their jobs, right? As soon as they get a qualified prospect, like we can trust that they're going to help the prospect understand the value of the product. So for us, it's like, okay, how can we build this in a way that is going to be most beneficial for our reps? One of the intent signal softwares that we have is tracking LinkedIn ad updates, right? So it's hooked into our Salesforce account. And this is our internal workflow. So every time somebody either clicks on an ad or views an ad that we push forward, we know that they're already inside of our TAM, right? Our total addressable market. They're already somebody that we know would be a good fit for Default. So when they're interacting with one of the ads that we're pushing forward, we want to know that's a great intent signal for us that's been working really well. So we're able to track that updated Salesforce field and then check, is this already inside of our Salesforce account or not? And if it's a new account, we have round robining logic that we've worked out with our reps that everyone feels fair, right? Everyone's pretty worked up about that. So we have the round robining, we create a new lead inside of Salesforce, and then this is where it gets great. We notify the AE inside of Slack where they live. They're not going to come inside of Default if they get an alert and go check the workflow and look at the logs. They just want the notification where they're already living so that they can act on it really quickly. And then we're going to create a task inside of Salesforce. So this is what Sam was talking about earlier. We use tasks internally just to make sure that we don't want to automate for reps the actual act of, reaching out or trying to be hyper personalized, because that we've all gotten really bad at messages, I'm sure. So instead we automate the creation of a task, which tells a rep the timestamp of like, hey, here is what's working. This person has clicked on an ad from us. They're inside of our TAM. Go reach out to them and see if they're interested. If they are inside of our Salesforce, we can check for an account owner. Is this a lead that we already know? If it is, we're going to update with, whatever information that we have. Notify the AE, hey, one of your leads just clicked on an ad, go reach out to them. It's a great time, right? And then once again, create a task. And if we know the account, but doesn't have a current account owner, we can once again assign a new account owner via round robining and then update that Salesforce account, notify the AE in Slack where they're living, and then create a task. So really what Sam and I's goal is to build all of these workflows in a way that is most conducive to helping our sales team like kick off and just kill it, right?
We want our reps to depackage the golden leads and they can go out and convert on that intent.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, this is to Chris's question. So here we're showing this is intent signal based on LinkedIn ad. I know you mentioned some of the intent data providers that you all have. When someone tell like these providers, right? They're like, hey, this company visited your website, visited this page, right? Whatever. We're like, oh, okay, cool. We go and take actions based on it. How do you all feel about the accuracy and validity of the signals that you get? Have you seen certain providers that do a better job? And Chris was specifically asking a question around those that claim they can identify or de-anonymize unidentified web traffic, especially in this remote work, hybrid work environment that we're all in.
Yeah, with all of the intent traffic, that's a great question. With all of the intent channels and intent signals, it's really as good as the intent itself. So obviously there is a lot of discrepancies. Sometimes the traffic is simply not identified if we're talking about just the web intent piece. So this shouldn't be the main pillar of your go-to-market motion, but it's definitely extremely helpful if you already have the account. So that's why we decided to go with that aspect. In terms of some other comments, like for example, we also have to have another workflow where we check for an opportunity. Our go-to-market strategy is that we create opportunity with a stage 0 whenever the qualified meeting is booked. So we have other workflows that actually verify if that task is complete or not complete or should be routed based on opportunities that we create. So if the meeting happened already, if they submitted a form, we know that in our CRM. So we check for that opportunity. If there is an opportunity and that opportunity stage 0 or beyond is not close lost, then continue with the task itself. So this is how we go about this. But yes, obviously we don't want to necessarily spam reps with tasks because then again, we burn the relationships that we have with reps.
Yeah. And that makes sense. You're looking, and I think, again, you're looking at collectively, again, you talked about this package of stuff, right, that you're kind of putting together for your reps, right? And I think that's the ultimate goal here. Nothing in life is 100% guaranteed or certain. Same with intent signals, right? Like it's not going to be 100% accurate, and so maybe if it's just like one intent signal, you may, be like, I don't know. But right, if you package a bunch of stuff up together, what does the package look like? And can that directionally tell you where you should head, what you should do, how you should try to penetrate, sell into that particular account, right? The answer to that is yes. And I think that's where a lot of the value can be delivered here.
And that actually brings me into my final thing here, which is we actually have the exact same sentiment as Chris, which is a lot of these tools aren't always the best for signals, right? And as we're trying to become this inbound holistic product where people can purchase default and then have everything on the inbound side satisfied, I'm going to show this to everybody. We're going to release this on Tuesday. So it's actually not out yet. But I'll show everyone a Figma mockup. Can we see my screen here?
Yeah.
So kind of going back to what I was just talking about, which is one of the things I really like about default is one, like not trying to own the tab, and then 2, starting from orchestration, because it's really hard to get all of these pieces connected in via APIs or native integrations or whatever. So the place that default has started is orchestration. And what we're actually releasing on Tuesday is the intent signal piece of our product. So you can see right here, it will actually track website visitors for us for your websites. When you have default, you can see, when this person is coming to your site, how many times they're coming. You can see what pages they're viewing here, like where did they come from, how much time did they spend on a page. Like if someone looks for 1 second on a page, maybe they just misclicked, right? And you can interpret that intent signal as like a high intent because it's a product page. But if we know that they spent, 2 minutes on a product page, that means they're really spending a lot of time there. So that's a great signal for us that that person is a qualified person, and the win is there as well. So you guys are getting a little bit of a behind the scenes peek of our February 25th launch here. And we have felt the same frustration of really good intent signals. So we've actually just built our own version of a world-class how to find intent signals, anything with website visitors, and figuring out, especially for us, we're running Google ads, we're running LinkedIn ads. So figuring out where they came from, right? It's going to help us understand the story of how people are finding default, what is moving the needle for them, and then how we can continue to build out our workflow for stringing together the sequence of intent signals or actions we need to take to convert a prospect. So we're just absolutely mastering the inbound motion, and I'm super excited to not only use this ourselves, but have all of our customers engage with this and get some better signals on their own inbound motions.
Yeah,
So
that's
excited.
awesome. Inbound is the way. And the thing I love about that is, one, everyone always asks the question, it's like, well, so what, right? It's like, okay, you give me an intent signal. It's like, so what do I do with that, right? You're kind of bringing those two things together, the orchestration layer with the actual data piece. And also think about how many times have we all built, I mean, you mentioned this before, Caitlyn, of webhooks, Zapier, all this other stuff. Anytime you start to need to move data across systems, and maybe you have a separate intent signal data provider with the orchestration layer, there's just, again, it's more stuff you got to build, more stuff you got to maintain, more room for error. This whole notion of tool sprawl is real. And if you're able to consolidate that into one product, one solution, it's heck yeah. So I was you actually went in full force to kind of share the details on what you all releasing. I was just going to tell everyone to hey, maybe you want to check out Default next week and see some of the things that you might hear about on LinkedIn. But yeah, there you have it. We told the world a little early, but that's okay. Yeah. Well, we've got 3 minutes left. I guess, Stan and Caitlyn, is there any last words of wisdom or just feedback for, again, the operators out there who are looking at intent signals and how to best route them? What would be one last thing you want to leave folks with?
Yeah, for me, I think it's just starting with select few, not going all in, because it's going to get messy if you focus on all of those signals, and then you probably end up just focusing on routing properly and taking care of just a select few. So it doesn't make sense to get all of the intent signals. I would just build to that sort of place where you can utilize all of the intent signal. Caitlyn?
Yeah, I would say if you can figure out what your top, let's say 5 intent signals are, and then figure out the products that will help you get to that point and just be able to aggregate them all into one singular place, less is more. We have had so many different platforms with intent signals and different signals saying different things. So I feel like if you can find your singular source of truth and then have everything kind of wired into one place, you're going to do the 80-20. We're going to solve 80% of your intent signal problems with 20% effort. And that's the place that, we're both trying to get to. And also I've tried to build out for my customers. So let us know if you guys have figured out how to perfect the intent signal game, because this is actually just a long ploy for us to figure out how other people are.
And it's still not
exactly.
done.
But I like that. I think, the main thing is, especially as you start to dive, if you haven't, or even if you are currently there with intent signals, right? Your wheels start turning really quickly. You're like, oh, wow, if someone visited this spot on my website and then this page over here, maybe if they were here X number of times over the last 7 days and their average session length was this, right? You can get complicated really, really fast. Instead of starting with the universe of things that you can track, maybe think about the actions that you would want to take first, right? Be like, oh yeah, if someone visits this page, I want to do this, right? And if you can answer the action question of what would you do if you set one of these intent signals up, then it's probably not worth setting up now, at least. So think about the actions, the outcomes that you want to drive. Well, with that, I want to say thank you, Stan and Caitlyn, for dropping some knowledge on us on all things routing and intent signals today. I've got nothing else for you. So to the attendees out there, Stan and Caitlyn, thank you very much. So I'll let you all run though, and I'll see you at the next one.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.